Gatherings are cancelled, schools are cancelled. And the Israelis now have the ability to effectively sort of hijack the cell phone network here. They did it in October 2024 when Iran launched around 300 ballistic missiles at Israel, and they've done it again twice in the last few hours. It's an alert for everybody, regardless of whether or not they're signed up to the warning apps, to tell people that it is a moment of national emergency. Since then, people around the country, millions of people, certainly people I've been speaking to, have been bedding down in their bunkers, in safe rooms around the country, in their houses or in their buildings. There has been no sign of any retaliatory attack yet. You know, we are prepared to see whether or not missile defense has come into action. That hasn't happened yet, and so everybody is on tenterhooks as to what's going to come next.
Alistair Bunker with the latest there from Jerusalem. And soon after the attacks, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu spoke. He said it was a decisive moment in Israel's history and that Israel had no choice but to act now. Let's take a listen to his whole statement.
Moments ago, Israel launched Operation Rising Lion, a targeted military operation to roll back the Iranian threat to Israel's very survival. This operation will continue for as many days as it takes to remove this threat. For decades, the tyrants of Tehran have brazenly, openly called for Israel's destruction. They've backed up their genocidal rhetoric with a program to develop nuclear weapons. In recent years, Iran has produced enough highly enriched uranium for 9 atom bombs. 9. In recent months, Iran has taken steps that it has never taken before, steps to weaponize this enriched uranium. And if not stopped, Iran could produce a nuclear weapon in a very short time. It could be a year, it could be within a few months, less than a year. This is a clear and present danger to Israel's very survival. 80 years ago, the Jewish people were the victims of a Holocaust perpetrated by the Nazi regime. Today, the Jewish state refuses to be a victim of a nuclear Holocaust perpetrated by the Iranian regime. Now, as Prime Minister, I've made it clear time and again, Israel will never allow those who call for our annihilation to develop the means to achieve that goal. Tonight, Israel backs those words with action. We struck at the heart of Iran's nuclear enrichment program. We struck at the heart of Iran's nuclear weaponization program. We targeted Iran's main enrichment facility in Natanz. We targeted Iran's leading nuclear scientists working on the Iranian bomb. We also struck at the heart of Iran's ballistic missile program. Last year, Iran fired 300 ballistic missiles at Israel. Each of these missiles carries a ton of explosives and threatens the lives of hundreds of people. Soon, those missiles could carry a nuclear payload, threatening the lives not of hundreds, but of millions. Iran is gearing up to produce 10,000 of those ballistic missiles within 3 years. Now just imagine 10,000 tons of TNT landing on a country the size of New Jersey. This is an intolerable threat. It too must be stopped. Iran is now working on what it calls the new plan to destroy Israel. You see, the old plan failed. Iran and its proxies try to encircle Israel with a ring of fire and to attack us with the horrible attack of October 7th. But the people of Israel, the soldiers of Israel, rose like lions to defend our country. We crushed Hamas, we devastated Hezbollah, we hit Iranian proxies in Syria and Yemen. And when Iran directly attacked us twice last year, we struck back inside Iran itself. Yet in defending ourselves, we also defend others. We defend our Arab neighbors. They too have suffered from Iran's campaign of chaos and carnage. Our actions against Iran's proxy Hezbollah led to the establishment of a new government in Lebanon and the collapse of Assad's murderous regime in Syria. The peoples of those two countries now have a chance for a different future, a better future. So too do the brave people of Iran, and I have a message for them. Our fight is not with you. Our fight is with the brutal dictatorship that has oppressed you for 46 years. I believe that the day of your liberation is near. And when that happens, the great friendship between our two ancient peoples will flourish once again. I want to assure the civilized world, we will not let the world's most dangerous regime get the world's most dangerous weapons. And Iran plans to give those weapons, nuclear weapons, to its terrorist proxies. That would make the nightmare of nuclear terrorism all too real. The increasing range of Iran's ballistic missiles would bring that nuclear nightmare to the cities of Europe and eventually to America. Remember, Iran calls Israel the small Satan. It calls America the great Satan. And this is why for decades, it's led millions in the chants of death to Israel and death to America. Today, Israel is responding to those genocidal calls with action and with a call of our own. Long live Israel and long live America. Our action will help make the world a much safer place. I want to thank President Trump for his leadership in confronting Iran's nuclear weapons program. He has made clear time and again that Iran cannot have a nuclear enrichment program. Today, it is clear that Iran is just buying for time. It refuses to agree to this basic requirement of peaceful nations. That is why we have no choice but to act, and act now. The hardest decision any leader has to make is to thwart a danger before it is fully materialized. Nearly a century ago, facing the Nazis, a generation of leaders failed to act in time. They were paralyzed by the horrors of World War I. They were determined to avoid war at all costs, and they got the worst war ever. They adopted a policy of appeasement. They closed their eyes and ears to all the warning signs. That failure to act resulted in World War II, the deadliest war in history. It claimed the lives of 60 million, including 6 million Jews, a third of my people. After that war, the Jewish people and the Jewish state vowed, never again. Well, never again is now. Today, Israel has shown that we have learned the lessons of history. When enemies vow to destroy you, believe them. When enemies build weapons of mass death, stop them. As the Bible teaches us, when someone comes to kill you, rise and act first. This is exactly what Israel has done today. We have risen like lions to defend ourselves. Over 3,000 years ago, Moses gave the people of Israel a message that has steeled their resolve ever since. Be strong and courageous, he said. Today, our strong and courageous soldiers and people stand together to defend ourselves against those who seek our destruction. And by defending ourselves, we defend many others and we roll back a murderous tyranny. Generations from now, history will record that our generation stood its ground, acted in time, and secured our common future. May God bless Israel. May God bless the forces of civilization everywhere. Thank you.
The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu speaking a little bit earlier about Operation Rising Lion, a targeted military operation that targeted the Iranian nuclear program that the Prime Minister called a threat to Israel's very survival. Words that were echoed by the IDF when they released this statement from spokesperson Brigadier General Effie Defrin, who says the strikes against Iran were to prevent the creation of a nuclear bomb.
For years, the Iranian regime has called for the destruction of the State of Israel, planning and advancing concrete military plans to do so. Over the past few months, intelligence has shown that Iran is closer than ever to obtaining a nuclear weapon. This morning, the IDF began preemptive and precise strikes targeting the Iranian nuclear program in order to prevent the Iranian regime's ability to build a nuclear bomb in the immediate time frame. We have no choice. We are operating against an imminent and existential threat. We cannot allow the Iranian regime to obtain a nuclear weapon that would be a danger to Israel and the entire world. This operation is for our right to exist here, for our future and for our children's future. The State of Israel has the right and the obligation to operate in order to protect its people and will continue to do so. The IDF conducted significant preparations for this operation. We are well prepared both in defense and offense to defend ourselves. The IDF will continue to defend the State of Israel.
Well, a little earlier, I spoke to Simone Ledeen, former U.S. Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for the Middle East, and asked her what she made of the American role in this.
I think it's clear that there has been coordination with the United States. I note that Secretary of State Marco Rubio issued a statement recently saying the United States had nothing to do with this. I don't think the Iranian regime will see it that way. So we need to watch and see what the reaction is going to be in the hours and days and even weeks ahead. But yes, not a surprise, and especially when you consider some of the news now coming out of Israel, where Israeli media is reporting that Iran actually has all of the components to produce nuclear weapons, and indeed we're starting to assemble those components. And that, of course, is a red line that everyone, Israel, the United States, and others have said for many, many years would not be allowed to happen. So in a sense, Iran had crossed the Rubicon and is facing the consequences tonight.
Israel for years has warned it wouldn't allow Iran to build a nuclear weapon. And you mentioned those comments by the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio. Now, he said Israel took unilateral action against Iran. He emphasized the U.S. are not involved in the strikes, and again emphasized that the top priority for the U.S. is protecting American forces in the region. Now, another phase of the nuclear talks between the U.S. and Iran was meant to happen in a couple of days. What do you think that this does to that, and how do you think the U.S. president will react? Because they were still, I suppose, vested in those talks. Those talks were still meant to go ahead.
Well, perhaps when information was presented, the information that's now being reported in Israeli media that Iran was building and assembling weapons, that really does put another, that really does change the calculus for the other party negotiating, i.e. the United States. So obviously these negotiations were not being conducted in good faith. Of course, there were many of us who never thought they were, given Iran's long history of subterfuge and lying about the development of its nuclear program. But be that as it may, President Trump wanted to and tried to bring Iran to the negotiating table and avoid this situation. But as you say, Israel has for many, many years advertised that it would never allow Iran to have a nuclear weapon. And it seems now as though that was imminent. And so Israel, in its own self-defense, had to take this action.
Like we've been saying, Marco Rubio at pains to say that Israel took this action unilaterally and that the U.S. is not directly involved. But do you think that this would have happened without the blessing of the United States, or at the very least their knowledge?
Well, I think I believe it's obvious that there was an element of coordination because due to the movements of our civilians out of several, our U.S. government civilians out of several parts of the Middle East. And again, those have been advertised over the last several days. It has not been a secret. And so, yes, the United States, it will certainly be viewed, let's say, by the Iranian regime that the United States was involved. Statements by Secretary Rubio, denying. And I'm sure it's true. We haven't played a role. Our jets are not doing this, but it doesn't really matter when you're the Iranian regime, because there's in their belief system and what they've advertised for many, many years Israel is the little Satan and the United States is the great Satan. And so what one does, the other is also associated. And so I don't believe at this time that it's useful to try to make these, to try to distinguish this. This is an Israeli action, not an American action. I believe that right now it's more important to look to the future and to see what is going to happen from this. And I do believe that we are all going to be facing a response in the hours and days and weeks ahead. So let's see how the Iranian regime reacts. I do believe it won't be focused only on, the response will not only be focused on Israel, but potentially also U.S. basing and U.S. facilities in the region and perhaps more broadly. But I would also like to add, if I may, that in the wake of the strike against Qasem Soleimani and several other actions that the United States took under the first Trump administration, there was a lot of belief that the Iranian regime was going to act very harshly and in a dramatic way. And certainly we did see an attempted response, but nothing at all that reached the what a lot of people were expecting. So I would just wait and see how the Iranian regime responds to this. I would also like to add that I believe we're seeing right now that there were targeted assassinations as well. There's some video and photos coming out now. So I think the Israelis have also been targeting potentially senior leadership in the Iranian military, the Revolutionary Guard Corps, potentially decision makers. And when you remove the decision makers from the battlefield, it obviously creates a lot of chaos. We saw that in their very successful operations against Hezbollah. So perhaps this is another wave of that sort of action. And will Iran be able to respond after the operations that have really just begun?
Well, earlier, I also spoke with the senior advisor for the U.S. program at the International Crisis Group, Brian Finucane, who said that the U.S. has bungled their negotiations with Iran. These Israeli attacks on Iran.
It represents a profound failure of U.S. foreign policy and a failure of the Trump administration to execute on its diplomatic initiative here and to use U.S. leverage to deter an Israeli military attack on Iran.
So when you hear the comment from the U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio saying that Israel took unilateral action and emphasizing that the U.S. is not involved and, what they care about is protecting American personnel in the region, what do you make of that statement?
It's disingenuous in at least two respects. One, the U.S. provided the necessary military equipment, the warplanes and munitions, for Israel to conduct this attack. If the United States had not provided that equipment, Israel could not have conducted this attack. Two, Israel conducted this attack with the expectation that the U.S. would come to its defense. So the U.S. provided a moral hazard here, encouraging such military action. Again, on both scores, the U.S. could have used leverage to deter such military action by making it clear that it would discontinue military support to Israel as mandated by U.S. law. And two, they would not come to Israel's defense if it took such action. And apparently it failed to do that.
I mean, this is obviously, it's over a lot of things, but the advancing nuclear program in Iran is certainly the catalyst. And the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, for the first time in 20 years on Thursday, censored Iran over what it says was it not working with its inspectors. The nuclear talks didn't seem to be going anywhere. Doesn't Israel have a point when it says that it's pretty much now or never, as Prime Minister Netanyahu said, before Iran manages to enrich uranium and have a bomb?
I think we need to take a step back here and think about both the nature of nuclear programs and the nature of U.S. national security interests here. There's no putting the genie back in the bottle in terms of knowledge of nuclear weapons technology, nuclear fuel cycles, and all of that. The second, and more significant for the United States, is what is the U.S. national interest here? Is it being dragged into another unnecessary and unlawful conflict in the Middle East and fueling such conflict by a regional partner? Or is it stopping that and preventing nuclear proliferation? And I would think it would be the latter, and that is the stated objective of this administration. This president came into office saying that there would be no more wars, no new wars, marketing himself as the president of peace. That's failed. He has a chance to redeem himself. He should use U.S. leverage to bring about an end to the hostilities rapidly, de-escalate. So I hope he takes the opportunity.
Israel is preparing for a retaliatory attack from Iran. We are also hearing from the Reuters news agency, they're hearing from a senior Iranian official that Iran's leadership is holding a top security meeting right now, presumably to decide how and if they will respond to this attack by Israel. What do you think the danger is when it comes to an escalation?
Well, I think there are a number of dangers. It becomes harder to de-escalate if there are numerous fatalities in Iran, numerous fatalities in Israel from any Iranian counterattack, and harder to de-escalate in some respects if the U.S. gets involved. Militarily, I think in some ways the best case scenario is if the U.S. urgently engages with both Tehran and Israel to tell him to stand down, and particularly using its leverage with the military partner it has in the Middle East and provides the critical military support to.
What about a confrontation between the U.S. and Iran? I mean, we do know that the U.S. Has pulled some of its diplomats from the embassy in Baghdad, in Iran, in Iraq, and other diplomats across the region. But how dangerous do you think that escalation might be, regardless of what Marco Rubio says?
Well, clearly, the U.S. is concerned about that, and with good reason. There is some possibility that Tehran will retaliate against U.S. forces in the region, which is why the U.S. withdrew diplomats and urged military families to leave. And so that's one vector for escalation if there were to be attacks against U.S. personnel in the region. But also the U.S. may get sucked into defending Israel, as it did previously under the Biden administration, from Iranian counterattacks. And if there were to be U.S. service members injured or killed in such efforts, that could suck the U.S. further into a conflict. A conflict, by the way, that this U.S. president has said he doesn't want. And so that's why it's incumbent upon him to urgently engage with both the government of Israel and the Iranian government to de-escalate the situation and use the leverage the U.S. government has, particularly with Israel.
Brian Finucane speaking to me a little bit earlier, and just a reminder of our top story. Israel has carried out a series of strikes on Iran, a precise offensive, they say, to strike Iran's nuclear program. My colleague Anna Jones will have more on this.
Over the past few months, intelligence has shown that Iran is closer than ever to obtaining a nuclear weapon. This morning, the IDF began preemptive and precise strikes targeting the Iranian nuclear program in order to prevent the Iranian regime's ability to build a nuclear bomb in the immediate time frame. We have no choice. We are operating against an imminent and existential threat. We cannot allow the Iranian regime to obtain a nuclear weapon that would be a danger to Israel and the entire world. This operation is for our right to exist here, for our future and for our children's future. The State of Israel has the right and the obligation to operate in order to protect its people and will continue to do so. The IDF conducted significant preparations for this operation. We are well prepared both in defense and offense to defend ourselves. The IDF will continue to defend the State of Israel.
نزدیک پادگان قلمردیه. پادگان قلمردیه اینجا. پادگان قلمردیه اینجا. نزدیک پادگان قلمردیه. پادگان قلمردیه اینجا.
منشأ این صداها هنوز معلوم نیست، اما خبرنگاران خبرگزاری صدا و سیما پیگیر خبرهایی هستند تا جدیدتر از منابع رسمی باشند. هموطنان تقاضا میکنم خبرها رو از رسانه ملی دنبال میکنم. اما تصاویری که ملاحظه میکنی تصاویری هست که لحظاتی قبل در فضای مجازی منتشر شده، اما صحت این تصاویر هنوز به تأیید منابع موثق نرسیده. همکارانم در تلاش هستند تا تصاویر جدیدتر و صحت این تصاویر رو از منابع موثق دریافت کنم. به محض اینکه تصاویر به دستمون برسه با تأیید منابع رسمی در خصوص تصاویر و صداهایی که شنیده شده
For years, the Iranian regime has called for the destruction of the state of Israel, planning and advancing concrete military plans to do so. Over the past few months, intelligence has shown that Iran is closer than ever to obtaining a nuclear weapon. This morning, the IDF began preemptive and precise strikes targeting the Iranian nuclear program in order to prevent the Iranian regime's ability to build a nuclear bomb in the immediate time frame. We have no choice. We are operating against an imminent and existential threat. We cannot allow the Iranian regime to obtain a nuclear weapon that would be a danger to Israel and the entire world. This operation is for our right to exist here, for our future and for our children's future. The State of Israel has the right and the obligation to operate in order to protect its people and will continue to do so. The IDF conducted significant preparations for this operation. We are well prepared both in defense and offense to defend ourselves. The IDF will continue to defend the State of Israel.
نزدیک پادگان قلمرویه. پادگان قلمرویه اینجا. نزدیک پادگان قلمرویه. پادگان قلمرویه اینجا.
منشأ این صداها هنوز معلوم نیست، اما خبرنگاران خبرگزاری صدا و سیما پیگیر خبرهایی هستند تا جدیدتر از منابع رسمی باشند. هموطنان تقاضا میکنم خبرها رو از رسانه ملی دنبال میکنم. اما تصاویری که ملاحظه میکنی تصاویری هست که لحظاتی قبل در فضای مجازی منتشر شده، اما صحت این تصاویر هنوز به تأیید منابع موثق نرسیده. همکارانم در تلاش هستند تا تصاویر جدیدتر و صحت این تصاویر رو از منابع موثق دریافت کنم، به محض اینکه تصاویر به دستمون برسه با تأیید منابع رسمی در خصوص تصاویر و صداهایی که شنیده شده.
For years, the Iranian regime has called for the destruction of the state of Israel, planning and advancing concrete military plans to do so. Over the past few months, intelligence has shown that Iran is closer than ever to obtaining a nuclear weapon. This morning, the IDF began preemptive and precise strikes targeting the Iranian nuclear program in order to prevent the Iranian regime's ability to build a nuclear bomb in the immediate time frame. We have no choice. We are operating against an imminent and existential threat. We cannot allow the Iranian regime to obtain a nuclear weapon that would be a danger to Israel and the entire world. This operation is for our right to exist here, for our future and for our children's future. The State of Israel has the right and the obligation to operate in order to protect its people and will continue to do so. The IDF conducted significant preparations for this operation. We are well prepared both in defense and offense to defend ourselves. The IDF will continue to defend the State of Israel.
نزدیک پادگان قلمرویه. پادگان قلمرویه اینجا. نزدیک پادگان قلمرویه. پادگان قلمرویه اینجا.
منشأ این صداها هنوز معلوم نیست، اما خبرنگاران خبرگزاری صدا و سیما پیگیر خبرهایی هستند تا جدیدتر از منابع رسمی باشند. هموطنان تقاضا میکنم خبرها رو از رسانه ملی دنبال میکنم. اما تصاویری که ملاحظه میکنی تصاویری هست که لحظاتی قبل در فضای مجازی منتشر شده، اما صحت این تصاویر هنوز به تأیید منابع موثق نرسیده. همکارانم در تلاش هستند تا تصاویر جدیدتر و صحت این تصاویر رو از منابع موثق دریافت کنم. به محض اینکه تصاویر به دستمون برسه با تأیید منابع رسمی در خصوص تصاویر و صداهایی که شنیده شده
For years, the Iranian regime has called for the destruction of the State of Israel, planning and advancing concrete military plans to do so. Over the past few months, intelligence has shown that Iran is closer than ever to obtaining a nuclear weapon. This morning, the IDF began preemptive and precise strikes targeting the Iranian nuclear program in order to prevent the Iranian regime's ability to build a nuclear bomb in the immediate time frame. We have no choice. We are operating against an imminent and existential threat. We cannot allow the Iranian regime to obtain a nuclear weapon that would be a danger to Israel and the entire world. This operation is for our right to exist here, for our future and for our children's future. The State of Israel has the right and the obligation to operate in order to protect its people and will continue to do so. The IDF conducted significant preparations for this operation. We are well prepared.